Hi everyone, Kim Schofield here. I am back today with a project featuring products from the Crafters Workshop. Today we're going to be creating a canvas using the stained glass daisy stencil. This is from the Crafters Workshop, and I'm going to show you how I started this. So I began just by covering a canvas board. This is from Dick Blick. It's an 8x10 canvas board with some black gesso. So these do come pre-gessoed, but I wanted the background to be black. And so what I was really going for was really kind of a stained glass look or a mosaic tile look. Probably more mosaic tile than stained glass. I think of stained glass as being more transparent, and mine is definitely more opaque. So I am putting my stencil down and holding it in place with some painter's tape. That's just to make sure it doesn't move. I just want to show you here the difference between the light and fluffy modeling paste and the regular modeling paste. So you can see the difference in the way they look. Light and fluffy is exactly that, light and fluffy. Kind of like icing is what it reminds me of, like a whipped icing. And then the regular modeling paste is very thick. You can see that here. It's almost like, reminds me of spackling or, anything you would use to cover up holes in your walls, anything like that. So that's kind of what it reminds me of. And I wanted something that was going to be the light and fluffy almost can have a little bit of a spongy type texture when it's dry. And I really wanted this very solid, smooth texture that you're going to get from the regular modeling paste. That's not to say that you don't get great coverage with the light and fluffy. It just feels a little bit different when it's dry. And I really wanted something that was almost, kind of like this idea that you would use with tiling or concrete, really. So that's why I chose to use the regular modeling paste. I will say if you're using art journals, light and fluffy is my go-to. That would be my favorite. For something on a canvas, I really like using the regular modeling paste. So just put this on with palette knife, and I am going over to make sure it gets all smoothed out and I have a good coverage on top of everything. And now we have the big reveal. This is the best part. Should do some kind of drum roll or something before this happens. Oh, isn't that fantastic? I love it. I've already seen it and I'm still excited watching myself do it again on the video. So I'm using my palette knife here because I did have on a very thick layer of this. So I'm going around the edges and I'm removing everything. And you can see how much extra there is on the edge and just cleaning all that up. And that dried fine. I left that to dry overnight because that was very thick. So now I have some of my Crafters Workshop acrylic paints, which are fabulous because they are really thick and creamy. And I have just some cheapo makeup sponges. And this is what I'm going to use to paint my background. So because I have a good thick coat of that modeling paste, my stencil almost just snaps back into place like it was a puzzle piece. And you can, use some tape to put the edges down if you want to. It doesn't really move around so much. So picking up paint with a sponge, we want to dab in and dab off, wax on, wax off. So you want to have, you don't want a lot of paint because if you pick up too much paint when you have a sponge, it's going to get all spoogey underneath the stencil lines. And so, better to go back with a second coverage than end up with too much mess. So less paint is more when you are using a sponge. I'd probably say the same for a brush too. You want kind of a thicker brush, a little more bristles, and you want to go dry. You don't want to be too wet with your paint. Now, I was a little stressed because I was kind of getting some color. It was a little challenging to keep some of that color from going into the other blocks because I wanted two different colors of blue in the background. But I ended up just taking my time. I'll show you what I do later. I did use a baby wipe. I kept a baby wipe on hand so that I could remove anything that was, might have gotten over. You could also use tape if you wanted to do that, or what's the other thing I'm thinking of, like Post-it notes or something. But I just took my time, went slow, and found that that worked really well. And I could use kind of the corner of the makeup sponge if I needed to, and just continue going around. I apologize that the bottom half of my canvas is cut off there a little bit. I swear I can't ever get my phone working right. You know, one day I've got it going in the right direction, the next day I don't. Um, Sometimes that happens. But all I'm doing is really continuing to put this color down. And you can see at the top there, I did use a baby wipe to remove some of that. But I'm going to go over that with a darker color and you won't even see the blue. And so now I'm using a little bit darker blue. And then I'll show you what I did to get into you can see in the upper left-hand corner, those spots are really small. And so I'm only using my sponge for the larger open areas because it would just be really difficult to get into those small spaces with the makeup sponge. And so I'm now just checking my coverage. So here I am, got all my larger spaces covered. And now I'm coming back in and I just have a flat brush. These are just brush from Ranger. You can actually pick these up. They have you can buy them in a pack. I think you can still get them from Ranger. These are great brushes and the pack is fairly inexpensive. I'll include a link down in the description below. But this comes in a pack, I think, of 10 brushes from small up to, a little bit larger, maybe an inch wide brush. And that worked perfectly for getting into all of those smaller areas. Then I decided I really liked it and just kept on using it to paint anywhere I had to go around the petals of the flower. And it's pretty easy to do because that modeling paste is, again, pretty thick. And you can see how well the modeling paste takes the color, the paint. This is just one coat. I think I had some of the little tiny spots I had to put a second coat on, but that is about it. So I'm just going to continue to paint all of I started with the background, so I'm painting the whole background first and getting that all covered. And then I went in and added some color to my leaves. And now I'm going to go in and add the yellow to my flowers. And so I started with the sponge because those flower petals are pretty large. So I started with the sponge and then I ended up finishing up way on the tips there. I ended up using the brush. So I kind of put one layer down with the sponge and then I'll go back and do all of the detail stuff more with the brush. So that was just easier to get better coverage. And I found that, the lines of this stencil are not very delicate or thin. So it really was not that bad to keep all the colors in their own spot. And I didn't really have a lot of overlap. So it ended up working out pretty well between just using that brush and the little makeup sponges. And then I'm adding just a little bit darker yellow onto the bottom part of the petals just for a little bit of shading. And using my sponge there to blend. And then you can see my shading there and my brown, and it's the big reveal again. Isn't that fantastic? Oh my gosh, I absolutely love it. You know what's really exciting? My older son said that he wanted this and he's got it hanging up in his room. That's not very sweet. So here's how it is completely dry. And this is how it looks. And I've got, you don't say I have too many areas there. So now it's totally dry and it was kind of making me twitch that there was some of that white showing. So I got out my trusty Copic marker and I went over all of the edges and anywhere that white paste was showing on the edge, I just colored with my Copic marker and it worked awesome. Which reminds me, you could use a Copic marker for coloring on modeling paste. I got to try that. And then I also traced around all of actually the whole thing, every petal, everything I traced around because you can see just a tiny bit of white. You'll see it especially here around this area. And that kind of made me twitch. So I colored that all in with my Copic. It seems tedious, but it actually only took minutes. It was really easy to do. So now going on to the next step, I wanted this to have a high gloss shine, kind of like you would see with tiles, if I had made this mosaic with tiles. So I am using the gloss gel medium. So Crafters Workshop has a gel medium in matte, which usually that's what I would use as a glue. Or any kind of collage glue that you'd be using. But for this, I wanted a nice gloss. So I am using the gloss paste. Now, this is not going to be as glossy as if we use something like a glossy accents, but it's got a great shine. I can't wait till you see it because glossy accents on top of this, you'd use 2 bottles to fill this all in. It'd be really challenging, I think, to keep it from seeping under the stencil, and then it might glue the stencil and it'd just be a mess. So this ended up working really well, and I love the look of it. And then I'll just take that off of there. Now I did have a little bit of the gel medium that seeped under, so I just went around the sides with a baby wipe, and then I'll show you what I did. So that cleaned all of that up. And I did end up letting this dry, and then I put a second coat on after the first one dried, just to add a little bit more. And then I took a smaller brush, and that was completely dry, and a baby wipe, and I just went anywhere that it was on the black. I just ran my brush along and then cleaned off that gel medium on my baby wipe. And then once I was completely finished, I ended up just putting that in the water. So here is my piece completely finished. You can see that great shine. I stamped a sentiment from a Wendy Becky set just on a piece of scrap paper that I have, and I cut all the words out separately. Now I'm going to use the matte gel medium because if any, kind of spoogies out, I don't want to have that glossy look on top of my paper. So this is real simple, just gluing these pieces down. And when I get any excess glue, I just use my little rag I have here, push them all down, clean up that extra glue, works like a charm. That way I don't really stress out about the glue, but this is matte. So if you didn't clean it up, it would be fine. You wouldn't see it, but I just use that towel to kind of push everything down, make sure it's adhered really well, and pick it all up. And that is just about it for my project today. Super simple project, but really high impact. The gloss is so awesome. Love using that on top. Really great look. And I hope you guys enjoyed the project. Here's a close-up look at that shine. Thank you so much, and feel free to visit me on my blog listed here or on the Crafters Workshop blog. Happy crafting!